too long, my dear, and alone, and alone. Now is the time to carry on from here, to march on and plant your flag where you belong. You belong. Oh, you
High on life, that's how I knew you. Always looking right through you. Before we took the fall on chemicals and alcohol. Skin and bone, that's how I found you. With the devils around you. Crawling through your heart, chemicals and alcohol. Back when we shared the pain, alone on a concrete bed, dancing with all the dead, alive in the shadows. Oh, back when we held the flame to light the midnight sun, we lit it for everyone, alive in the shadows.
Welcome to the Breaking the Silence webinar series, everyone. My name is Candace Fair, and I am the Community Enhancement and Development Officer with CASA Foundation. We are the fundraising arm of CASA Child, Adolescent, and Family Mental Health. We raise money to support CASA services and raise awareness about children's mental health. And today we are so honored to be partners with the Mental Health Foundation to bring to you Breaking the Silence. Both organizations are passionate about mental health care and are grateful that the Breaking the Silence team has brought us together to share resources and support with all of you. We are so happy that you're able to join us today. It's more than ever important to recognize and show our respect to the Indigenous peoples of our country through a treaty acknowledgement, which is an act of reconciliation to recognize the traditional territory of the Indigenous people who were the first to call this land home. Today, we acknowledge that we are on sacred Treaty 6 land, the ancestral land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. And we recommit to our promise to live together on this land and take care of one another in these difficult times and always. Just a few housekeeping items, everyone, before we begin. Today, obviously, is a virtual session, and we just want to make you aware of a couple things. First of all, all sessions this week will be recorded, and that's so that we can offer that back to you for viewing. And just for your awareness, for a short time, Breaking the Silence website will also have these recordings up. Just want to remind everybody, please, to keep your microphones on mute at all times. This, of course, just takes away the background noise for our presenter. And you're welcome to keep your cameras on or off. However, if you're an active person and you like to move around, we do ask that you please turn that camera off and just continue to listen. At the end of our presentation today, we will have a question and answer piece. We do have a content heavy evening though. So if by chance we don't get to all the questions that are asked, we do have a commitment after the formal program from our presenter to recap those questions, and we'll get answers for you and put that back out again online. So let's get into why we're here this evening. Today's webinar will be covering the context of adversity and also the skills that facilitate resilience. There are many contexts for the experience of adversity amongst children and youth in today's society. It's the expectation of parents that children will somehow overcome peer pressure, academic stress, bullying, and peer rejection as milestones in development towards full maturity as healthy, contributing adults of society. However, the journey of resilience is not mapped out, and supporters of these children and youth sometimes are at odds at knowing what resilient skills are there that make bouncing back possible. Today, our presenter is Linda Forde, you guys. Linda has desired to help youth since silently suffering herself as a youth with depression and suicidal ideation. Linda completed her Master of Science in Marriage and Family Therapy from Loma Linda University and her Bachelor of Science in Psychology at the University of Toronto. Linda's work experience includes close to 20 years in various capacities, from outreach worker to psychologist with diverse populations and many age groups. She developed and facilitated a group for men in Ontario with a nonprofit agency that was part of the Domestic Violence Court Pilot Project, and in Alberta for 7 years, facilitating groups for women who experience domestic violence at Parkland Turning Points Society. Prior to her registering as a psychologist, Linda worked at Yellowhead Youth Center and Boyle Street Community Services. Linda's work at Alberta Health Services, working with children and youth, has inspired her interest in this topic of resilience. Linda also works in private practice at Kells Counseling. Wow, Linda, we welcome you here this evening and just are so grateful for you being able to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Candace, for your warm introduction. And I'd also like to thank the Mental Health Foundation for giving me this opportunity to be your presenter today. I'd also like to thank Sam and Amanda for helping me with the technical needs for this presentation. Everyone will experience adversity at one point in their lives. However, is resilience guaranteed? Resilience was once viewed as a trait, but now research is showing that it is an ability that can be nurtured in the brain. Many of us prefer to hear stories about people who have risen above all odds stacked against them. We like to see how the underdog becomes the champion, and we like to watch the hero conquer the villain. Why are we so inspired by such stories? I think it is because at some point in our own lives, we become aware that we need the same ability to rise up when we want to give up. There has been many adversities experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic that has shed light on the disparities within the fabric of our society, between the haves and the have-nots. The adversity that pre-existed COVID is reaching its climax for some individuals and families, challenging our understanding about the vulnerabilities and needs of our marginalized communities. Those who wonder some days how they will keep going. Mental health needs across the country have been reported on the rise, with provision for services not meeting the high demand. Children's mental health services and programs often report limited financial resources to address the communicated needs. This webinar will introduce you to the concerns and experiences of adversity that children and youth face. We will look through the lens of what science is teaching about man's ability to overcome existing barriers and bounce back. My hope is to give a voice to the silent sufferer and to give the listener a greater understanding of the things that the silent sufferer may not have told you. I was a silent sufferer for most of my teenage years, which has now fueled my desire to continuously learn new strategies and ways for helping our young. I also value their parents and understand the disconnect that can sometimes take place when everything is done in their power to provide a bright future for their children. Being a silent sufferer isn't easy. And even though accessing resources, the intensity of the fight remains hidden. The shame also remains hidden and causes less desire to connect and further isolation. So here we are, in essence, breaking the silence, continuing conversations that will increase the likelihood that those who are considering suicide will have safe ears to share their deepest struggles. The objective of this webinar is to identify the context of suffering within and without for children and youth who experience adversity. We want to understand the internal environment that intensifies suffering, to explore factors that facilitate resilience, and to increase awareness about the resilience journey for marginalized persons. I would like to highlight that adversity is not limited to the external experience. My desire is that you will not only identify the nature of adversity in your conversations, but that you will also detect the seeds of resilience and hope for the future. I have found that even in the research for this webinar, my ears are peaked open and I'm hearing even more clearly sounds of resilience from the clients and not only of their adversity. So what is adversity? Let's define it. Adversity is a state or instance of serious or continuous difficulty or misfortune. And I would like to highlight that adversity is not limited to what happens to us on the outside, but also includes the suffering taking place on the inside, in our minds, the internal chatter. Many clients describe it as the voice in their head, intrusive thoughts that persist and are relentless. Some identify this voice as unwanted, while others see this as their own and true representation of their worth, even if demonstrating low self-esteem. I would like to show you a clip of a short video that you can even take some time to look at the full length of it after this webinar. And it is called Tomorrow's Hope. It's the First Nations Youth Suicide Prevention comic. I'm going to show you a clip that demonstrates the internal chatter.
You're going to fail your team. You're going to miss. You let your team down again.
Good try, Kayla. Almost had it. So close.
Sorry.
Head for the basket!
You're going to fail your team. You're going to miss. You let your team down again.
Good try, Kayla. Almost had it. So close.
Everyone is mad at you.
Hey, Kayla. Selfie time. You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
It's not your fault, Kayla. That was a difficult shot. You were double teamed with no time.
You should have made the shot. You let them down. I could have made the shot. I let the team down.
Don't be so hard on yourself. You still have a lot of games to go.
You're going to fail your team. You're going to miss. You let your team
He's
down
probably just running
again.
late.
Good try, Kayla. Almost
She forgot
had it.
about you again.
So close.
She doesn't care about you. Everyone is mad.
Hey there, kiddo.
Hey, Kayla. Selfie time.
Sorry.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Sorry, everyone. It went into playing two videos at the same time.
Practice makes... Wow, you know what I mean. Take care, my girl. Remember, we'll go out sometime this week to practice.
Okay. Thanks, Uncle. He thinks you're weak. Leave her alone. She doesn't have time for you.
Hi, honey. Sorry I couldn't make it. That damn car wouldn't start again, and this assignment has to be submitted before midnight.
It's okay.
How is the game?
She doesn't care. We lost. Again.
Oh, good. Way to go, sweetie.
She's not even listening.
Hey, I have an idea. Did you want to make some...
You're worthless. You can't even cook an egg.
When we get a new place, are you gonna have your own room?
That's the idea.
But I like sharing a room with you.
I know. I like having you as a roommate.
Really?
Well, yeah, you're my little sister. We're friends till the end. Okay, remember, work hard.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a good role model for her. They can see right through you.
Hey there, City Mouse. How's it going?
He doesn't want to hear about your problems. You know, the usual, just amazing.
Are you sure?
I heard about the game last night. Said you were pretty awesome.
What? It's the truth. They're a tough team.
It was all right. It would have been better if I got the last basket.
Yeah, oh well. You'll get them next time, right? Hey,
Okay, so I will pause there. And a lot of what was shared in this video, I hear from the clients. I hear about their internal chatter, and I hear the pain they feel around even interpersonally with their family. Many of the clients speak about that voice with even though getting affirmations from friends and family, and it's so incessant, and they believe the negative messages of not having worth or value with the people in which they associate. This is the adversity that is missed by most. The state of serious and continuous difficulty that becomes too much to bear for those who choose suicide. I want you to begin to be able to imagine the intensified adversity for those who have both discouragement happening on the inside and then have to face the adversity in the external world with all the perceived coping abilities depleted. I've heard many clients tell me that after examining their internal world, they don't have the resources and strength to face the adversities on the outside, whether it be through peer bullying, isolation, invalidation, family conflict, all of the different adversities that the youth face. Many youth report to me that they feel so exhausted to care about themselves or to reach out to others for help. They're unable to consider what others see as the simple daily routines of life, much less fulfilling their obligation to attend school or to look into how their choices now will impact their future. So I want to show you another internalized look. It's a journal entry that a youth gave me permission to share for this webinar. Okay, it's called Pink. And I have purposely put the colors there to emphasize the point. Pink. Emotions can be tricky. You can be feeling completely happy one moment, and then the next moment you feel empty and lost out of nowhere. I try my best to be pink most of the time, and I do represent those tones of pink most days. However, there are days when I feel red, a deep red. I feel stuck in a deep pit of emotions that I am trying to feel my way through. It's as intense as the dark color red. When I'm in the pit where all I can feel is red, that really dark red, I try my best to feel my way through and catch the little glimpses of pink. Sometimes the pink shines through just when I need it most, but sometimes the intense red only lets me catch a glimpse of the pink before drowning me in once again. As I said before, I mostly look for the pink in life. I try to feel the happiness and excitement as a girl finding a new dress she likes at the mall. I try my best to push through the red and see pink instead, as that's really the only color I want to see in my life. Most of the time, the pink overpowers the red, and I am genuinely happy, like right now. However, there are times when there are splotches of red that slowly start to spread across my vision so that the pink is harder to see until it is everywhere. The splotches of red overcome me and drown me in intense feelings of sorrow where the pink is no longer seen. It's a battle with the emotions, like the battle between pink and red. There are days where you are feeling really good and happy, excited for what the future holds. And there are days where all of those happy and excited feelings are drowned out by intense feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and depression. The color red is not really supposed to be seen as a depressing color overall, but the contrast between that dark, intense red and shade of that light pink is rather interesting. They are technically the same color, but can be associated with different feelings and situations. It can be the same with people. We all represent different emotions and colors at times, different times, like pink and red. We can be happy like pink or sorrowful like red. We are the same person in the end, but the emotions and feelings we display and feel can change in an instant. I chose to share this excerpt because it exemplifies the experience I hear every week with my teen clients. The avoidance of uncomfortable emotions and the desire for only happiness. It moved me and surprised me because this was written by my daughter. Teens go through many emotions, and listening to their experience is important. We are breaking the silence. I admire my daughter's courage to be vulnerable in sharing this excerpt first with me and then the viewers of this webinar. Sharing isn't easy, even for this professional. So let's look at the definition of resilience. It is the ability to bounce back from adversity. I've heard it said that a person's own belief in their coping ability can influence that choice that supports resilience or choices that hinder its development. As a supporter to the one who suffers, how do we ignite belief? I am going to be quickly reviewing 4 authors: Elizabeth Stanley, Linda Graham, Tarana Burke and Brené Brown, and Annalise Singh. The first one I'd like to look at is the book by Dr. Elizabeth Stanley. Dr. Elizabeth Stanley wrote a very insightful book entitled Widen the Window. For those who aren't familiar with the phrase, widen the window, many clinicians teach clients that they have a window of tolerance that determines how much can be handled. This window is not determined by belief, but the survival instinct and experience. The purpose of teaching about the window is to increase a client's awareness about what we are able to handle before finding ourselves in a reactive response of fight, flight, or freeze. And this is often triggered by our amygdala in times of perceived threat. Clients are taught how to identify stressors that push them outside their window. They're given tools to facilitate self-regulation while in the midst of the stressor. Dr. Stanley asserts that the window, with training, can be widened so that we are able to endure more effectively the stressors that come our way. Alternatively, she argues that the window can also be narrowed, meaning that our coping ability can become further repressed and reduced. This is based not only on our external factors such as further oppression, disappointment, or devastation, but also by what she described as unconscious belief patterns, irrational emotions, and secretive, harmful coping behaviors. What intrigued me about the book was the thought of the window widening, because normally I would focus on people trying to learn what they're able to handle without thinking of encouraging the possibility of widening the window. Dr. Stanley speaks of the need of the body to recover from trauma and informs us that it is the failure to have a recovery period which narrows the window. You may have heard people say, go back to baseline even. They don't have a chance to go back to their baseline. So she challenges the reader that there are no shortcuts in this process of growth towards greater resilience, and that this change of growth is experiential in nature, requiring consistent practice over time. This way, the body learns from experience alternative choice points in times of great stress. Dr. Stanley posits that the roadmap of resilience includes bringing your awareness back into the body, identifying body signals and cues, confronting life as it is, not as you want or expect it to be, and making effective choices. Dr. Stanley cautions against the habit of comparing your adversity with that of others. She warns that by doing this, we can minimize the internal validation needs to acknowledge our own stressors, and as a result, we invalidate ourselves and inhibit our own recovery. I recall trying to educate an adult client that what they were describing was PTSD symptoms, post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And the response I received exemplifies this point I just made about comparison. She said, I find it really hard to believe that I have PTSD. Like, I'm okay, like I've survived. I'm not experiencing as much adversity as the next person. And she also gave the example of war, which is normally how people think of PTSD. What was really great about Elizabeth Stanley's book is it can apply to all walks of life, because she talks about the high achiever academic, the workaholic, all those persons who endure levels of stress that compound and compound upon each other until you have an allostatic load, overload is what she says, where your system is overrun. So we have this natural tendency to do the same when people talk about their adversity. When a person says, I'm overwhelmed, if I'm not aware of my own assumptions, then I find myself examining the details of that person's story and drawing conclusions that they shouldn't be overwhelmed. I did this to my daughter. I have to catch myself every now and then saying things like, what do you have to be stressed out about? You have X, Y, and Z. All the things I believe I provide her as protective factors from depression. Or maybe you're familiar with the other tendency of invalidating pain. So we have to remind ourselves to be careful of telling people, why don't you just think about things to be grateful for? Again, another invalidation. The next author, Linda Graham. She wrote a book, Bouncing Back, and the book that follows this is Resilience. I love what she has to say about resilience. She says that all your life, your brain has the flexibility to create new patterns of response to life events because of neuroplasticity. What is neuroplasticity? Neuroplasticity means that all of the capabilities of resilience you need are learnable and recoverable. This is what she says. She goes on to say that even if you didn't fully develop your capacities for resilience early in life, maybe because of a lack of healthy role models, less than secure early attachment, or the experience of too many adversities or trauma before your brain had developed the necessary circuitry to cope, you can develop them now. And I like this because many times we focus on the ACE acronym, Adverse Childhood Experiences, as a way to measure whether someone will be resilient. But with the work of Linda Graham, she is saying that we can override that. We can grow. Like Dr. Elizabeth Stanley, Linda Graham argues that resilience can be strengthened, but she also, like Dr. Stanley, acknowledges that it can be diminished at any time by our experiences. The goal then is to increase the flexibility in our responses. we need to create new habits and choice points that strengthen resilience. So the next person, she also mentions lots of strategies, which I would encourage if anyone's interested in learning more strategies to pick up the book. She has tons of pages of strategies that help us to learn how to build resilience that include interpersonal as well as building our focus for meditation and mindfulness practices that enhance our ability to become aware of what's happening inside. I would also like to bring your attention to the book, You Are Your Best Thing. This book was written by Tarana Burke. She started the Me Too movement as an effort to eradicate sexual oppression and violence. And Brené Brown is known for her work as a shame and vulnerability researcher. They decided to do a book together. And at first I was really curious what this book would be about and what it is about the Black experience. But what I find really interesting about it is that it is a compilation of stories that show the importance of creating safe spaces for vulnerability so that the shame that hinders resilience can be identified. So when people talk about their experiences of shame from marginalization and oppression, normally the response to that shame is hiding and isolation, depression, and thoughts of suicide. But in this book, you get to see the story of transformation for many of the people, authors who contribute their stories, where they develop and show you the process of personal resilience. And the shame resilience is defined as being able to identify the triggers for shame, being able to respond to these triggers with courage and openness. So in this book, you get to see how the shame we fear can actually be our greatest strength. So now, the next book I want to bring to your attention, which actually has really impacted my work with the queer and transgender community and clients, is this one by Annalise Singh. The first time I picked up this book in the bookstore, I thought, well, I wasn't really looking for a social justice book. How is this going to help the LGBTQ community? And then I, again, listened closely to my clients who were struggling, and I was trying to figure out, why am I not able to improve their depression symptoms? I was trying cognitive behavior therapy strategies, helping them to identify their core beliefs, their sense of worth. I was also introducing them to mindfulness strategies to help them realize how to calm the mind and how to improve their ability to challenge some of those negative perceptions. However, none of this was really working. And one of my clients really surprised me when they said that they were thinking of suicide after describing lots of oppression that was happening, bullying that was happening in the school. And this is a client that's really bright. When I'm talking to this client, I see lots of life. And so this really surprised me. And so I decided, you know what, I need to look more closely into this book. And the focus of this book is on challenging the internalized messages. And the internalized messages about one's identity and building confidence needed to face life challenges. And so in this experience of invalidation, whether in the home or in the school environment, or just in their everyday, while looking for supporters to listen to their pain, this is what I noticed to be happening. So the goal is personal resilience. That's what the goal of the book is. And these are skills that I started to practice with my client, and I saw improvement to perceived coping ability, which I talked about at the beginning as also critical. Because sometimes our clients, even though we may believe in them, their family may believe in them and their ability, they're not believing in their ability to cope. And so the skills of resilience here help, because it's the external adversity that they don't know how to respond to that is intensifying the internal chatter, the inner voice, the internalized shame. So she talks in her book about microaggression. So what is microaggression? Some people may not have heard of this, but it's a comment or action that subtly and unconsciously or unintentionally expresses a prejudiced attitude towards a marginalized group. So for example, you will never be a real woman. He's gay, but he's like the greatest guy in the world. Are you a girl or a boy? Now, I'll be real. When I heard about this term microaggression, even when going through it with my client, I had to say, well, how can this be my fault if I say something that offends you, if I didn't know it was offensive? And this trans client explained to me her passion to educate, but the barrier and obstacle for her own internal self-validation was looking at how it's received while educating. So there was lots of frustration when people weren't receptive to the education. And this is why Annalise Singh talks about 2 strategies for acting in response to microaggression. One is internal, where the person has to self-validate and find ways to affirm themselves. And the other is external, where there's boundary setting and assertiveness. And this is when they're able to state their boundaries, explain. Sometimes explanation is actually not going to be helpful because people come back with more insults. So that's the other thing I've found. I've had to dissuade people from trying to explain their position to people who aren't interested in listening. And just merely to be assertive and to just to state what they're offended by. And so this process of being able to have a voice, to be able to explain what's going on for them, even to those, whether those who are bullying them or those who are actually family and friends, is sometimes reported as very empowering. So Annalisa Singh mentions a 3-step process. She talks about naming. So you have to be able to have awareness of your feelings. Then you have to validate. So what is it that actually happened that caused me to have this feeling? Let me validate that. Would anyone else feel this way if they experienced that? And then the last one was act, which I just explained as having the 2 components. And so I found some real progress happening when I use this strategy. So the whole idea around social justice, when it is present, people feel that their rights have been respected. And I know in our society, there's lots of disagreement about what is your right. And this is where we have discord. But this journey is a tough journey for the LGBTQ community because they are trying to communicate their rights, but many times shut down from expressing it. And for those in the family who may not agree with the lifestyle or the choices or the expression of identity, when these silent sufferers are not heard, what really saddens me is to hear them say that they have no out and suicide seems like the only choice. That is the part where I really feel a pull and I feel so torn, because sometimes I'm also working with families who are concerned that the therapist is going to be pressuring, influencing, placing their children with beliefs that they don't share. And so what my encouragement would be in light of these is for parents and families to be able to identify when microaggression is happening, when you're engaging in this with your child, because you might not realize that you're pushing them into further isolation of not wanting to open up and talk to you. So I'm just going to show a video here on what is two-spirited identity.
What is two-spirit identity? While two-spirit can mean different things to different people, it often refers to the gender and sexual diversity of Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. Specifically, someone who identifies as having masculine and feminine spirit. Or it might describe a person's sexual, gender, and spiritual identity. Two-Spirit is sacred and exclusively indigenous. The term Two-Spirit was coined by Elder Myra Laramie, seen here in the middle of this photograph, at the 1990 Indigenous Lesbian and Gay Gathering in Manitoba. Today, it's a mainstream term, and you might recognize it as the 2S in LGBTQ2S+. While it's a relatively new term, it's an age-old concept for many Indigenous peoples. Two-Spirit is an English version of the Anishinaabemowin term Nij Meneduig. Before Two-Spirit, the common term was Birdash, which came from the French term kept boy. Despite common use, Birdash was inaccurate and derogatory. It was first used by European explorers who were offended by Two-Spirit customs. Two-Spirit people weren't just accepted, but revered by their people. They held prominent spiritual and ceremonial roles. Their identity was honored as a spiritual gift. Ironically, Europeans saw this as further proof that Indigenous peoples were dangerously uncivilized. So Two-Spirit people were oppressed, and related customs went underground. Today, Canadian society is steeped in colonial notions of sexuality and gender, even in Indigenous communities. The term Two-Spirit was created in response to this. It's an act of decolonization. However, a general term such as Two-Spirit is also problematic because Indigenous cultures across Turtle Island are too diverse to be adequately generalized. While imperfect, Two-Spirit has been useful to facilitate understanding across cultures. Indigenous sexual and gender minorities are a high-risk demographic for suicide in Canada. The Indigenous suicide rate alone is reported to be almost double that of other Canadians. Suicide risk factors include violence, oppression, isolation, and rejection. But this risk can be reduced through connection to culture, tradition, and community. The reclamation of Two-Spirit identity fosters this kind of connection. It offers a history through which people can find strength and pride in who they are. People like musician Jeremy Dutcher, who identifies as Two-Spirit, are using the term to forge a path forward.
I do this work to honor those who have gone before. And I lay the footprints for those yet to come. This is all part of a continuum of Indigenous excellence, and you are here to witness it. I welcome you.
I like the fact that we're able to see the traditions that strengthen sense of identity.
What is Two-Spirit identity?
So, Annalise Singh mentions the LGBTQ specific stress and mentions 3 areas where stress is experienced: intrapersonal, interpersonal, and institutional. And so we've been looking at the intrapersonal internalized negative messages. We've also been looking at the interpersonal microaggressions, things that family members or friends may do, and even those who target the people in this community, and how it leads to difficulty in feeling a sense of belongingness and acceptance. And institutional is looking at the systemic oppression and discrimination that happens in society. Now, I'm not sure if I'll have time to show this video. I'm just thinking here that what I did want to say is that what I notice when I service many of my clients, and which has been a journey for myself, is being able to respect another person when you have a different belief or understanding. And I think the silent sufferers that we've talked about in many contexts are experiencing, especially when I hear the youth talking about the disrespect they're getting from their peers, and sometimes even from adults, is the really heartbreaking thing that will keep people in silence. And so this video here is what the youth would like people to know.
All my teachers during their parent-teacher conferences would kind of warn my mom and be like, Miss Park, I think your son is kind of different. And that's a microaggression, so don't do that.
So I'd say the absolute number one thing that a parent can ever do for their child is to listen. Like, please, I can't tell you how important it is to just have a parent to listen to what you have to say about your identity, about your experience, about what's frustrating about being queer, about what's wonderful and amazing about being queer, and to have that be validated.
Try really hard to get your kids' pronouns right. You know, saying it's hard works at first because everything is hard and everything takes getting used to. But if it's a year later and you're still not getting your child's pronouns right, then that's not on them, that's on you.
I've always loved makeup, and so I feel as if I shouldn't have to completely abandon my love for makeup artistry just because I want to be perceived in a certain way. I should still have the right to be identified properly, even though I'm wearing makeup.
I really couldn't have cared less what anyone else thought about my queerness, but it was really just my mother's acceptance that I yearned for. And when she gave that to me, my world changed, and I was able to really blossom into my true and authentic self.
Trying to keep judgment outside of any comments that you make, because while my parents were generally pretty good about me coming out, there were a lot of microaggressions and things that they said. And so just being really conscious of what you're saying and how it might come across.
Listen to your kids, hear them out, listen to what they're saying, how they're feeling, because it's really hard for them to say these things. It's not something that just can be said easily. If it was, we wouldn't have all of these problems in society with LGBTQ, violence and higher rates of, depression and suicide.
One of the main things that's really important for parents to do to support their kids is to give them space, to not make any assumptions about what this time in their life means. So I know a lot of parents, my parents included, have said things along the lines of like, well, don't make any decisions yet, you're young, which is a good sentiment to have if you're gonna have that sentiment across the board, not if you're only gonna say that once I decide to tell you that I'm coming out as queer.
The parental support is what queer children need.
Hear them out, validate their feelings, tell them that, you are valid and your feelings are valid too. And
any words of affirmation are always good, saying thank you for sharing that with me. I really appreciate you confiding this in me.
Things take time, but how much time do you really need when this person that you brought into the world is really struggling to be seen?
And this is, and this is my fear. My fear is that we will have more and more suicide from the silence. And so I sometimes am torn because parents are communicating their fears and they have a right to their feelings and their beliefs. And children are expressing their fears and their fear of not belonging and in essence, not even wanting to live because of that lack of belonging. And so we have to come in our efforts of breaking the silence to a place where we can put our judgments and assumptions aside and show empathy and love. And so
all my teachers during their parent-teacher,
when we're looking at how
all
to listen,
my teachers during their parent,
trying to move forward the slide. Our practical applications for breaking the silence is to listen well. We need to create safe places. We need to validate. We need to connect these youth with informal and formal supports. And we too, as supporters, need to learn the skills of resilience as supporters. And so to close this presentation component before opening up for questions, I will just leave you with a demonstration in the last video of what validation looks like.
Show you.
Ma, what's up? I know I haven't been myself lately. I feel like I'm always failing. Like I'm failing you.
My girl, why would you think that?
I feel like I'm not doing a good job at anything. And I feel terrible all the time. I pretend to be happy, hoping everything will be better, but it just makes it worse. I don't know who I am anymore.
I know who you are. You're a strong Indigenous woman. You believe in family, culture, and always doing the right thing. You have dreams, courage, and the ability to overcome any challenge. You're actually my hero a little bit. You're so much more mature than I was at your age. I'm sorry I haven't noticed that you're having a hard time. I just get caught up in my own stuff sometimes. And then when I do get it, I don't always know what to say or do to make it better. I just freeze.
It's okay, Mom. I understand.
I know you do, love. Thank you. We've had to get over a lot these past few years. I still get triggered every time I hear about someone passing. Just gets me thinking about how your dad died.
I know. Me too.
And now I'm back at school and still working over at the band office. I'm trying my hardest to get us back on our feet. I'm sorry it felt like all our struggles were on your shoulders. I didn't mean to do that. We're going to figure this out together. Promise. I love you.
I love you too. I still feel low sometimes, but I'm learning how to cope with my feelings. I don't know what life has in store for me, but I'm getting help, and I want to see what tomorrow brings.
Guide us, give us strength to make our way through this world. Give thanks to all the things that have been given to us.
I know that I'm safe for now.
Okay. And there we have it, the end of the presentation component. And now we will switch to question and answer period. I leave it back to you.
Thank you so much, Linda. That was a great presentation. I've been busily writing down my own notes. I want to just say, for the sake of time with our audience, we will have time for possibly one, maybe two questions from Q&A. But just to recap for all of our participants, tonight's session was recorded, and you will receive or be able to have access to that recording. And should we compile any other questions for our Q&A, Linda has agreed to take the time to answer those, and then we'll recap and ensure we send that out as well for participants. That being said, Linda, we have one, I believe, really solid question here at present time. And I just want to read it to you. It's with respect, I think when you were recapping one of the books you were mentioning, you brought up this point about shame, perhaps being able to be one of our greatest strengths. So the question was, how, Linda, can the shame we fear be our greatest strength?
Yes, and I think that gets back to the work of Brené Brown. When she talks about vulnerability and shame, she's talking about being able to identify it, because most times we run away from it. And the very thing we're ashamed of could be the very thing to be proud of. And when I say proud, it has to do with the internalized messages that you have about yourself, the challenges that you give to those messages. The shame now brings to the forefront how you're viewing yourself, and then these can be shifted to our greatest strength. And so I think even when I think about being a Black individual, it could be seen back in the day as a shameful thing with derogatory names attached to it. But then in looking towards the experiences of the shame, then I think what I saw in some of the stories were the strengths, even from the people who suffered, and how they were able to focus from the shame on their greatest strengths that came from it.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for your perception there. We do have time then for a second question. This one came in and it says, and I think again, it's a question worth pondering. So how can we, as community supporters, how can we be empathetic if we haven't ourselves experienced what that youth has gone through?
Right. And I think that's the whole journey that, you know, even for myself as a counselor, I wasn't very acquainted with what it's like for a trans or queer person. And I wasn't even sure if I was a suitable counselor for them. And so what makes me have more confidence now is that I took the time to stop and listen. And I started to empathize with the pain that we all share as our human experience. And then I got to hear their perspectives of the pain and let go of my own assumptions around judgments of what they are facing. And so I got to be more in touch with the empathy from their perspective and not from my own judgment place.
Thank you. And so what I'm hearing you say, Linda, is that we don't necessarily have to have had parallel experiences to have or create empathy. What I heard over and over in your presentation, and I loved it, was the fact that, like you just said, be aware of your own assumptions, don't draw conclusions, and you know, try your best not to invalidate. And I think you made a really good point in your presentation with respects to language use and how easy those microaggressions can pop up. And those of us with the best of intents can really put our foot in our mouth, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think it's a skill that you practice and they will tell you, right? And it's not just LGBTQ plus, but many people are suffering with different adversities. Even if it's colonization and oppression, everybody has a different experience and we can't assume that we know their experience, right? And so if we have better listening ears to it, then we can have empathy because we all know what pain feels like.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you, Linda. All right, we'll move on to our next slide here, just with respects to winding up our evening. And again, keep those questions coming in, participants. We will gather them. And Linda, again, has agreed to answer them to the best of her abilities, and we'll get them back out to you. So, you know, with respects to breaking the silence, this slide here, we're happy, again, to offer these sessions for free to our community. And the more accessible resources we have, the better equipped we can be to help each other. And that being said, if you have the capacity to donate, now is the best time to do so. I'm proud and happy to say that with the support of EPCOR and their Heart and Soul grant, we've been given the opportunity to have all of our donations matched dollar for dollar during the Breaking the Silence week. And more donations obviously means more mental health resources and support for everyone who needs it. And then lastly, just another little shout out. Breaking the Silence was started by a group of friends to raise awareness about mental health, to create safe spaces, and to have conversations and share resources within the community. We're proud of how the event has grown and continued to support all of you. We couldn't offer this event though without the support of our amazing partners. So thank you very, very much. Thank you as well to all of your participation this evening in tonight's webinar. And we hope you're going to take away some new information that you can integrate into action and or do some further learnings for yourselves. A huge shout out and thank you to Linda Forde for your expertise, Linda, and your wisdom. I could have listened to you speak for another hour, honestly, and have a flurry of questions myself. The webinar recording, again, just a reminder, will be made available tomorrow for you all to share with your family and friends. Thank you. We are sharing our evening and our time in much gratitude, and just continue to enjoy your night, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you, Candace.